morning, friends of the channel. Hi, do you think it catches all of us? It doesn't go high enough. They see something huge but miss its scale or nature. Let's call the three girls to help us. Introduce yourselves. Who's here? Hi, Ilaria, Daniela, Sarah. What are you doing here? We're attending the course. Are we making the furniture? At the course? But where are you from? Reggio Emilia, Emilia Romagna, Comacchio and Modena. And so they're here to help us. Today, we won't be the ones working hard. They will. Brilliant. Let's go. Come on over here, everyone, because we're starting with ABBA. Go ahead. They thought they could do the course without starting with ABBA. Yes, ABBA. What is it? ABBA is the perfect solution for cleaning surfaces before colouring them. Avoid doing it when you have to apply jasmine oil or nourishing wood with waxes. Use it before recolouring or colouring. Cleans, degreases, removes impurities, makes the surface more porous. All right, so it helps the colour stick better. How much do you use here? There are 3 litres of water. I add more or less 2 glasses, and I put in a bit of baking soda, about 2 tablespoons per litre. Folks say, but you always change the amounts. It depends on how dirty it is. If it's filthy, I'll make the solution stronger. Slightly more powerful, a bit more aggressive. If the furniture only needs a light clean, I can use less of both. Gloves, have you got them? Did. Sponges, have we got them? This scrub. Here I've also put out 2 little brushes, because in some spots you might need them. You need to do ABBA both, on the more intricate outer parts as well as the inside. And then obviously, how do you rinse? With clean water and a cloth, shall we start? Off you go. As you can see, here there's some old paint that's peeling off in places, mainly because it's probably absorbed some moisture. It was in an old abandoned garage. This sideboard that now looks so good, so lovely, was actually in an old nursery. Then the regulations changed and they had to remove this big piece of furniture from the nursery. And what happened then? It even had a broken glass, broken handles, hinges coming off. It was in quite a bad state. Obviously, before starting this tutorial, what did I do? I fixed part of the top moulding, we put in that piece of wood, we removed the handles, we sanded here because it was all full of twisted nails, we cleaned the handles, and then we tried to figure out whether it had woodworm or not. It doesn't have woodworm, but we've already checked and treated it, all right? Now we start by doing a good job with ABBA and scraping off whatever comes off, because there, in some spots, it comes away. In certain messages, sometimes I say that you say to me, you said there's no need to sand, so why are you sanding? No, no one is sanding. Here, we're washing, and then we go straight over this paint with magic. Obviously, if in certain spots, like here, the paint is flaking off and coming away because you're losing bits, you have to remove it, because otherwise you'll end up applying new paint on top, which, poor thing, will just peel off. So please always remember that with magic you can safely, let's say, rely on it. You can go over paints, nothing will happen as long as they're well stuck to the surface. When you have glass to protect before painting, I always recommend a very, very important method. Now I'm going to put on more tape because up there it's too high. It would be even better if we could manage to do a single strip of masking tape all the way up there. Now let's do a little bit. I'll take the 5cm tape and I'll start by placing it on the glass part first. You might ask me why? Now you see, I stick it here, then I take a little spatula like this, start from the centre and work my way as much as possible into the edge. Obviously you mustn't tear the tape because otherwise our work is pointless. Be careful that it doesn't stick to the wood. You need to get as close as possible without sticking to the wood. Now you can do this job. Now you can do this, making sure it sticks down properly. And only now do you take a cutter and do this, cutting at a 45-degree angle into the join with the wood. This is the only way that truly guarantees you'll protect the glass. Why? Because if you try to be precise and get the masking tape as close as possible to the wood, there will always end up being an overlap. There will be an overlap and the masking tape will never be perfectly straight. The only way to get really precise masking tape and properly mask the glass is this one. Remember, you start from the glass, stick it on gently, bring it right up to the edge, and then you go over it. Obviously, you do the same thing in the corners, everywhere. Will you do it like this? Let's carry on. When you set out to do a project with such an incredible paper, the colour really has to be studied down to the smallest detail. But this isn't a new paper, it's a used one, put up and taken down, because unfortunately it no longer seated the room. So what do you want to do? Do you really want to waste a paper of this quality? Never! So first, always remember that often a paper can be saved even after it's been removed from the wall. Why do I say that? Sometimes papers are removed that come off well, with care, meaning that vintage or antique ones, you can't use them on the wall anymore, but why not cut them up and put them in drawers or display cabinets? Which is a way of salvaging them, sometimes in a really lovely way, because often you end up saving papers that are truly old, antique. So now we've decided to create a custom colour to make sure it looks perfect, with the flowers from this paper, which are these ones here. Everything revolves around these two flowers. What did we do? We created 3 or 4 shades and tried to figure out which one, besides being the most beautiful, was also the one we liked the most. A much more violet colour. A colour that's a bit more dulled, a fresh colour that's somewhere in between, slightly lighter, and a more playful colour. But I let the girls who are here with me today choose, and we put it to a vote, and they chose the middle ground. They wanted the middle ground. So we're going to create this shade. Now, it'll be easy, really easy, because I've already tested it and I already know it's dead simple. On a white sheet of paper, the colour comes out really well straight away. But the thing you need to remember is that on such a large piece of furniture, if you run out, you have 2 options for what to do. Then there's a technique that won't show any slight change in colour that might happen when you have to mix up the batch again. So weigh everything. We'll do a décapé after that because we want this vibrant green to show through in the streaks of the finish. But obviously, it's also in my interest to make enough colour to cover the whole piece of furniture. I don't need it to be a completely covering colour everywhere, precisely because I'll be doing the décapé afterwards. Still, the shade needs to be lovely, pure and rich. And this shade needs to be clearly visible. So I always start by making up half a kilo of paint straight away. So what do? I already know I'm putting in half a kilo plus this bit here, which is really about 30 grams. And then I measure out with a spoon how many spoonfuls of the lighter colour. I add it so that I have a clear idea of what the final shade will be. Don't like this method? No problem. Just use your kitchen scales, the ones that measure in grams. You've put in 400 grams of paint and 10 grams of another colour. If you need to redo it, you're sorted, no worries. But you should never be afraid to mix colours, because when you mix colours, you create an endless variety. They're always different, always perfectly tailored, but above all, it's easy, not difficult at all. To create this amazing colour, we'll use mostly Vin Brulé and a little bit of Bacio di Rosa. Obviously, we'll then recalibrate and recreate it in a larger quantity. We've already mixed it very well. Now, I'm using a kitchen spatula to help, so I don't waste anything. I'm going to put it straight into a tub, and why is that? Because at least if I end up using a roller to do the higher parts or cover larger areas, I'm really glad to have all the space I need. I empty the jar completely, and always remember it's best not to waste anything, not even a gram of paint. I'm going to add this as well. Obviously, it's only about 2 spoonfuls. I know exactly how much I've put in, so it'll be easy for me to make it again. Now, Emma, come over here next to me because we're going to create the right shade. Just like this morning, the one we like best. You tell me when to stop. I'm not weighing it, and I don't even want to go by spoonfuls. All right, here I go. Add it in. I'd start like this. I think we're at about 100 grams, more or less. I'd add a bit more. Yes, it's still very regularish. I think I've put in about 150 grams of Bacio di Rosa in total. So at this point, we've got about 650 grams of paint. This is a really big piece of furniture and we're doing 2 coats, so we'll probably use it all. Remember, I'm mixing with this kitchen spatula right now just because it's rubbery, so I don't waste anything and it mixes well. But in the end, mixing with the brush is even better because the brush scrapes the bottom of the tin, the jar or the tray. So it mixes things even better for me. Test. It's still dark. Yes, it's still dark. Bacio di Rosa again. And look, now that's it. We haven't quite got there yet. I definitely added 100 grams more. Now, we're going to apply it in different ways. And why is that? Because I want to show you and them the fundamental difference between applying things with any roller or with these rollers. And especially with any old brush or a brush like this one, which is fantastic. Always remember, when using rollers in general with a nap, especially our microfiber ones, it's best to do this first. Just like brushing a cat, really. All decorators use this trick, and it helps to keep your roller practically as good as new. I've got a washing machine specifically for rugs and cloths. First, I rinse the paint off, then wash them in the washing machine so they come out clean. The trick is some fabric softener and hair conditioner, and they come out like new. It's not being fussy, but this way they just last for years, which saves money. Remember to treat your brushes the same way. Remember that when you use microfiber bristles like these, there's no risk, is there? Instead, like with the sponge roller, you get a bit of foam. We're lucky to have a lot of paint today because the piece of furniture is very large. So it's true, at some point you'll definitely see some bubbles coming out, which is just air, but far fewer than you'd get compared to the bubbles and foam that a sponge roller can create. However, it's important when you start to load the roller as much as possible so there are no dead spots inside, no areas without paint. Why is that? Because the roller should always be used lightly and without pressing down, but it also needs to be loaded because if you don't load it, you won't spread the paint properly. Now I'm starting here with the roller, so with a long pile and a pointed brush. Why? Because I'm going along the edges. Afterwards, I'll also show you how to apply it with the king brush. Look here, the side. Always the sides first. And the last side. A nice full roller. Don't worry if at first it looks like there are streaks, the slightly rougher part. Don't worry, because as you spread it, it really self-levels a lot. Wow, this is lovely. The colour obviously grips really well. Also because we've washed properly with ABBA. So now what I really want you to understand is this. The first coat must always be completely covering. That means where you've gone over, you shouldn't be able to see even a speck of the previous colour underneath. Never. This is just the first coat, obviously. Then there will be a second one. Obviously, I'm not pressing down. Now, when I go over the side, I can carry on, but I always have to go over it very, very lightly in a really gentle way. I'm not pressing down. If I find myself needing to press to get into the depths, I'd rather stop and use the brush. And there you go. Why should you use a roller? Because it covers so much, because it saves you money, because it doesn't take much effort, because it makes the paint go 3 times as far. With a brush, you use a bit more paint, but why should you also use a brush? Because our king is amazing, and now I'll show you why. Always use a pointed brush and always do the corners first. The pointed brush works well in depth and you don't have to put in much effort. Remember, as you can see, I'm holding the brush by the ferrule. This is important to avoid wasting paint, to control everything properly, and above all, to get right into the corners without leaving marks or imperfections. Now, the King brush, which is a brush that leaves a nice brush stroke if you want, very textured, or if you prefer, very smooth, with a good reservoir. Crisscross brush strokes, first horizontal, always. Without going mad. This is the crisscross brush stroke. It gives you good results without driving yourself crazy. Then, smooth it out following the length of the side and the piece of furniture. And there you go. What's the difference? Here, we'll have a lovely textured streak, which is a luxury for us because a nice, well done, visible brush stroke is never a mistake. It's the mark of knowing how to paint well. If you have this flaw, if you're in doubt, if you don't think you're skilled enough, you can always use a roller, which works brilliantly and leaves a fantastic surface. But remember that a good, well-applied brush stroke like this is always something to be proud of when doing restyling. When you tell me, I'm sorry because you can see the brush stroke, that's wrong. Because if you can't see the brush stroke, it means it was either sprayed on, which is fine if that's what you want, or otherwise it was done on a production line in a factory. And that's not the luxury of restyling. So guys, it's up to you. Whether you see the difference between roller and brush, I just want you to try both. Second coat over the whole surface, just like before. The girls will decide what to use, whether to use a roller or a brush, because by now they've figured out what suits them best. So I'll start again with my pointed brush. Once again, I do my nice edging, neat and precise. Always remember that the colour is, in fact, already very nice and offers good coverage. But to achieve a truly perfect shade, a beautiful deep tone, it's essential to apply this second coat. We'll also be doing the décapé later, so actually this second coat will hardly be visible, but it's important for the colour tone. Don't press down. Always remember that the roller should be used properly. Use it as long as it has something to give. When you see the roller starting to dry out and it has nothing left to give, don't press it down because it will end up making a mess. Otherwise you'll waste paint because you'll have to apply another coat. Perfect. Now I'll hand it over to the girls and let them get to work.